You want answers?
I'm as mad as hell, and I'm not going to take this anymore.
You want answers?
You have offended my family.
I think I'm entitled. You want answers? I want the truth.
And you have offended Shaolin Temple.
You can't handle the truth.
Surely you can't be serious.
I am serious. And don't call me Shirley.
Radical Rant.
All right, folks, if you've been following my Facebook or the blog at stash.normal.org, you'll know that a select tiny few people who are part of this Patients Against New Approach Washington, these Patients Against I-502, or as I like to call them, Patients Against Pragmatism, they're out in force and they're trying to spam and flood the world with all of their fear-mongering and scaremongering about the terrible dangers that will befall pot smokers should we vote for legalization. Okay, so I'm going to take some time and debunk a few of these things while we just had some time for you and me to talk. First of all, and this is directly from their website. I am reading from their About section on their website here. What's worse is the zero tolerance clause for those under age 21. Drivers in this age bracket will be guilty of DUI even if the smallest amount of cannabis is found in their system. Anything over a 0.00, in fact. In other words, a designated driver subject to secondhand cannabis smoke would be held criminally liable for the activities of others. All right, so I figured an idea here that might help illustrate a little bit about this scare. Remember, the idea here, 18 to 20-year-olds would be a driver, it would be secondhand smoke, right? And then they would test positive and get a DUI. All right, I want to show you this study. And this results from a study, very famous study done by Karshner. And it's ironic because the opponents of I-502 sent this in to Dominic Holden at The Stranger to show how there was a possibility that patients could get busted under DUI. They showed him this study. But what they don't realize is when they look at the study, it actually contradicts what they are trying to say. Now, here's the results. Now, what it did is it took a look at 25 people who reported using marijuana an average of 12.2 times or 12.2 days within the last 14 days, right? So people who damn near smoke every day of the week, right? Now, these people ranged in age, they had an average age of 26.2, right? Mostly African Americans in the cohort here. And the mean amount of cannabis they smoked per day, the average these people reported smoking per day ranged from 1 blunt to 10 blunts a day, or from a dime bag to an ounce a day. And a lot of the people that were involved in this study had smoked on the very same day they came in for their initial testing, okay? So that's what you're seeing in these columns here, days since last use. That would be the zeros, would be the people who smoked today. And when they came in for testing, you see all those NDs in that first column where you see ND? Those are the people where there was no detected nanograms per milliliter at all. Firsthand smoking, right? Firsthand smoking, 11 of these people, 11 out of 25, who had firsthand smoking of anywhere from a blunt to an ounce a day had no detection. In fact, the guy who was L here, who smoked an ounce a day, had 0.4 when he was tested, right? And 5 is the cutoff here for the DUI, right? So this guy who smokes an ounce a day came in and tested at a 0.4. All right. So they go on to say, what about the children, these poor kids? They're going to be designated drivers and they're going to get busted for secondhand smoke. All right. Remember, that's firsthand smoking I was just talking about. And just about half the people had no detection for firsthand smoking. All right. Let's get to the secondhand smoke part, though. First of all, are we talking about secondhand smoke being exhaled by the passengers in that car at the same time that he's designating driving? Because if that's the case, then yeah, he should be punished. He should get the same punishment as someone who lets his passengers drink beers in the car while he's designating driving, right? So let's erase that part of the problem. Or are we talking about the secondhand smoke that was exhaled by the passengers back at the party before he began designated driving? All right, now, that's simple enough to debunk too, even without turning to science, just by asking yourself one simple question. If secondhand pot smoke would trip a drug test, don't you think a whole bunch of employees fired for positive drug tests would have successfully used that excuse in court by now? I went and looked up one of the leading manufacturers of drug testing kits. And remember, these are people who want to catch you. And on their fact sheet, it said, will exposure to passive marijuana secondhand smoke result in a positive marijuana test? And they say, the most common excuse for a positive marijuana test is, I was around some people who were smoking pot. Research has shown that casual exposure to marijuana smoke will not produce a positive test. A person really has to work at being exposed to passive smoke to create a positive test, as in very close confinement without ventilation with several smokers for a period of over an hour may result in a low but measurable amount of marijuana in urine or blood. This demonstrates that even though the person may not have directly inhaled the smoke from a marijuana cigarette, they inhaled enough secondhand smoke to get high. So what we're saying here is, in this one talking point, we've got to vote against legalization of an ounce of weed, a pound of edibles, and 4 pints of tincture. And we must not create a commercial market for growing, selling, or buying marijuana for adults 21 or over. And the reason why we have to vote no is some young adult might be below the legal age of cannabis consumption. They might be hanging out in a very small room that isn't well ventilated with several people who are taking a whole lot of weed. And we don't know if they're of legal age or not, but it doesn't matter. But he or she did not smoke any of that weed himself. And he might get in a car and drive shortly afterward, and might either get into a wreck and attract the attention of a cop somehow. And that cop might suspect the young adult is driving impaired somehow, even though he hasn't been smoking anything all night, right? He's only had secondhand smoke, so we don't know what it is he did that attracted a cop's attention. Or maybe got unlucky in the taillight, who knows? But the cop would have to suspect he's not impaired by alcohol, and then would have to subject the young adult to a sobriety test and or a DRE that he or she would fail. And the cop would have to arrest him or her and drive him or her to a hospital for a blood draw. And in the hour that has elapsed, plus however long he or she was driving before the cop stopped him or her, then there might be detectable amounts of THC in his or her blood. And again, remember the first-hand smokers, half of them didn't have any, even after smoking blunt after blunt after blunt. But he might have a detectable amount of THC in his blood from his secondhand smoke, and then that young adult's convicted of a DUID. All right. So I suppose if you think preventing a young person from 13 levels of highly unlikely ifs is worth the certainty of another 10,000 marijuana possession arrests next year guaranteed, then this line of reasoning makes sense to you. Now, I think a more reasonable solution for those 13 ifs is for the crew to pony up some money for a cab or bus fare. I am getting really tired of every single little tiny what if, oh my God, the cops will be assholes, they'll do the most terrible thing possible, and that's why we should vote against legalization. You're not going to get a perfect bill to vote for. And look, if there were a bill, if I could guarantee that every single year from now till the end of time, Washington State gets to vote on legalization, you might even be able to convince me. But those chances are few and far between. Since 1996, when medical marijuana was passed, how many times has legalization been on the ballot nationwide? I think it's 4, maybe it's 5. I can think of Nevada, Alaska. We had the chance. I think they did twice in Nevada. There was an attempt in Colorado, I think in 2006, maybe 4 times. 4 times out of 50 states over 15 years. I don't like those odds. The year gap between Prop 19s in California, the first time they tried to legalize, and the most recent time they tried to legalize was 1972 and 2010. That's a gap of 28 years. You want to wait another 40 years at 10,000 marijuana arrests per year for your next chance to legalize in Washington State? Or I'll give you a better scenario. Colorado tried it in 2006. They're trying it again in 2012. You want to wait another 6 years in Washington State before you get legalization on the ballot? Because I'll tell you what, when legalization fails at the ballot, the people with the money and the prestige and the influence to be able to get these things passed, they don't look at a negative result and go, oh, gee, our thing was far too conservative. We need to make it more liberal. Nah, that's not the way it goes. When they fail, they go, oh, see, too many voters were scared away by this proposition of legalization. We need to restrict it more. We need to make it a little tighter. So you got to be careful what sort of decision you're going to make here when it comes to voting this November. Now, for me, it's pretty simple. Politics is war by civil means, and I cannot give aid and comfort to the enemy. I cannot vote on a marijuana legalization initiative the way the drugs are, the way the cops, the way the DEA, the way the Mexican drug cartels, and the way Vinny the dealer down the street who doesn't want to lose his easy day job wants me to vote. I'm going to vote to keep people out of jail. I'm going to vote for an imperfect legalization, realizing that citizens fighting for their rights have a hell of a lot better chance than criminals fighting for their rights. Woohoo! They tell me I'm all red. Got to watch the blood pressure, folks. I'm Radical Russ for Todd Armstrong, Wiz Khalifa, Ganja John, and Cannabis Carry. Thanks for joining us. Stay tuned for Hour 2, where I'm sure we're going to get a lot of calls at 971-533-7111. And until next time, take care of each other, tokers.
We love the earth.
This is NORML Show Live, the voice of the marijuana nation.
You take a seed, you plant it, you grow it, you dry it, you roll it, you smoke it. You take a seed, you plant it, you grow it, you dry it, you roll it, you smoke it. You take a seed, you plant it, you grow it, you dry it, you roll it, you smoke it, and it goes.